reading this text, we are captured, we are arrested, our attention is riveted by that phrase, "You have not passed this way before." This is true because these people, and I'm preaching about ancient Israel, but I'm preaching to Life Center. These people were a special people. These were the very people of God, chosen by God. These were the direct descendants of Abraham. These people had been brought out of 430 years of heavy bondage and forced labor in Egypt. These people had been brought across the Red Sea up to Mount Sinai, where they had received the law of God. And these people had been brought to the very doorstep of the promised land. This is what makes these words particularly significant. When they were brought to the doorstep of the promised land, this was 40 years before. They were on time. They were on schedule. 40 years before this, they had come to the promised land. But through fear and doubt and unbelief, they could not and would not enter. They angered God because God had promised. It was not, listen, the promised land was not their promise, it was God's promise. The promises of God are not about you, they're about God. God had promised Abraham, he had promised Isaac, he had promised Jacob. He watched over them in the land of Canaan. He led them into the land of Egypt. He led them up out of the land of Egypt. And when they arrived at the doorstep, right there, of the promised land, 40 years ago, they doubted. And they were gripped with fear. They did not trust God. They did not believe that what God promised, he was able to do. They would not remember all that God had done. Is that not often true of you and I? God can bring us out time and time again, and when something else comes up, we have the audacity to doubt God. Some of us ought to be ashamed of ourselves. Of all that God has done for us, we have the audacity when something comes up to wonder if God will make a way. They doubted God, and because they did, they were fated to turn away from the promised land and a 40-year march in the wilderness. Now, this 40-year march in the wilderness was a judgment. God wanted to kill them all at once, but Moses said no, and God relented. So God said, I'll kill them over a period of 40 years. This was a 40-year funeral march. It was a 40-year march until a whole generation of unbelievers had died out. And all they did for 40 years was go in circles, around and around and around, in circles for 40 years. They were not going anywhere. 40 years. They saw the same thing. 40 years. No new visions. 40 years. No new possibilities. 40 years. No new future hopes. Because everything they saw, they had seen it before. 40 years just, I've seen that mountain, I've seen that hill, I've seen that creek. But now, a whole generation has died out. And you and I don't like this, but sometimes some things have to die out in your life before you can move forward. Sometimes God has to take some stuff out of our lives to put some new stuff in there. You see, we have to understand that God's will is going to be done with us or without us. God will find somebody who will believe him. God will find somebody who will trust him. Oh, his will is going to be done. And I volunteered. I don't want God to do it without me. I don't mind who else God calls to preach, but I don't want him to call somebody to preach because I wouldn't preach. I don't care how many churches God raises up, but I don't want him to raise up a church in place of Life Center. Oh, church, don't get caught up in unbelief. And don't get caught up in thinking that just because, watch this, that we're moving, that we're going somewhere. This 40 years said they were moving. There was physical movement. They were marching, but at the end of every year, in other words, every January, they were the same place they were the last January for 40 years. But then change came. Oh yes, everything does come to an end. And then after 40 years, a whole generation had died out and a new day had come. In other words, for them it was 2014. And the Bible says once again they were at the doorstep of the promised land. Now watch the change. Watch the change. The book says that when they got ready to move this time, God changed his modus operandi. Do you know that God is immutable, but don't lock him in a box? God is unchangeable in the character of his nature. God is unchangeable in his attributes, but God might throw you a curve if you let him. He'll show you something you haven't seen before. If you're going to walk with God, you have to stay in the word and stay on your knees, because what he did yesterday, he might not do tomorrow. For 40 years, they had followed a cloud. God did a cloud by day. He put a cloud by day because they were in the wilderness. And so this cloud protected them from the ultraviolet rays of the sun in the waste howling desert. It protected them. It was a protection. And then as the evening sun began to take its rest against the backdrop of the western hills, that amazing cloud would turn to a pillar of fire, and that cloud would then protect them by giving them light and heat, because the desert is extremely hot in the day and freezing cold at night. So God turned that pillar of cloud into fire to give light to the camp and to give protection and to give heat. And they were to watch the cloud, because as the cloud lifted, they were to march. When the cloud stopped, they were to set up camp. Let me tell you something. Don't mistake the provision of God that God is necessarily pleased. Now, they were under judgment, and watch this, and they were going to die in the land, but God kept feeding them. See, just because I've got clothes on my back and shoes on my feet in a car outside doesn't mean God is pleased with me. God took care of them, although they were still dying off. Did you hear what I said? So don't measure God's blessings by what's in your pocket. God will take care of you because he's obligated to take care of you. But although he had taken care of them, they were still going nowhere. That's what we believe today, don't we? Movement. That's what people want. Movement, activity. Show us something. Show us something. But movement in God's economy doesn't always mean life. Sometimes we do a lot of movement to prove something that we don't really have. And a lot of us are often afraid to be still before God, because being still before God means nothing is happening. But often we don't really know if God is with us until we are still. God is not always in the shout and the dance and the holler and the noise and the exhausting activity and the fire and the earthquake. Has anybody ever heard of the still small voice? We as a church should not be worried about whether or not we're moving. The question is, are we going anywhere? Whole lot of churches are moving. They're moving at breakneck speed, but they're not going anywhere. But now, watch the change. God says, take your eyes off of the cloud and watch the ark. Now, I want you to follow the ark. What is the ark, Pastor? You know that chest, that box, not very similar to this table down here. The Ark of the Covenant that contained the commandments of the law, that sacred mercy seat. And it's usually borne by the Kohathites, but now it's borne on the shoulders of the priest. And watch this. God said, watch the ark. Church, what I want you to do in 2014 is watch the ark. Because the ark is the symbol of the presence of the Lord. That's what I want you to follow. Now, it's all right to follow me, but if you follow me and I'm not following Christ, you still won't get anywhere. The Bible says if the blind lead the blind, they both fall in the ditch. Your prayer should not just be, Lord, I'm following my pastor, but Lord, let my pastor be led by the Spirit of God. If the Spirit of God is not leading us, we're just going around in circles. But church, I'm calling upon us, follow the ark. I'm not exactly sure which way we're going. I don't have a pre-flight itinerary, but I call upon you today. Follow the presence of the Lord. That's why we're reading through the Bible this year. That's why we're going to increase our prayer time this year. Follow the Lord. He knows where he's going, and he knows how to get there. Follow the ark. Follow the will of God. Follow the plan of God. My plan won't work. Your plan won't work. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. We have our plans and our visions and our machinations and our design and our program, but only God can make something happen. I heard Jesus say, without me, you can do nothing. We can wear ourselves out trying to do this and do that, but somewhere I read, except God build the house, they labor in vain who build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Not by power, nor by might, but by my Spirit. If it's going to happen like center, God's got to do it. I can't do it. You can't do it. He can't do it. Ricky, Buddy, Bobby, Mike can't do it. It's going to take God, but one thing I know, God can do it, and he will do it. All he needs us to do is follow him. Follow him. Now watch this. Don't look for the cloud. I'm not working that way. Don't look that way. Follow the ark. Now watch this. All before now, he gave them manna to eat. Manna was strange bread. As a matter of fact, the word manna literally means, what is it? They didn't even know what it was. And God has done some stuff for us we didn't know. Huh? But God is changing your diet. God is changing your diet. God is changing the way he's leading you. Some of us as a church and as individuals, let's tell the truth, we've been going in circles. But God said, watch the ark. You have not passed this way before. I'm getting ready to do something you haven't seen before. And when the priest took the ark, the Bible said they stepped in the Jordan. And when they stepped in the Jordan, the feet of the priest and the Jordan stood up, stopped the water, and God dried the ground and they crossed over. But they had to watch the ark because they had not been that way before. And I say to you, we have not been this way before. So you and I must stay back 2,000 cubits. What's that? That's about 1,000 yards, about a half a mile. Because by staying back, we don't rush it. We stay back so we can discern and understand which way God is going. You see, watch this. Don't miss this. We know, pay attention, wake up. We know where we're going. And we know where we want to be. We just don't know how to get there. But he's leading us. So stay back so you can see. So this year will be for us a year of watching. A year of discernment of his presence and his plan and his purpose. And we will follow that ark into the land that God has promised. We would not hypothesize. We would not intellectualize. We will not overthink or overplan or look at our checkbooks or look at our resources. We don't have to. We have not passed this way before. Never mind who's with us. Never mind who's against us. It doesn't really matter now. We have not passed this way before. Never mind what the critics say. Never mind how long it's been. I'm not afraid anymore, church. We haven't passed this way before. Doesn't matter who bows their head or grits their teeth. It doesn't matter. Oh, yes, it's been 40 years. It's been long. It's been hard. You don't think I know it's been long? You don't think I've gotten tired of looking at the same thing? But it's all right now. I'm not afraid anymore. The ark is moving. We're at the Jordan. And we will watch. And we will follow. We will enter God's promise because we have not passed this way before. And the ark of God will lead us forward into what God has promised, because here is the truth. What God is going to do in the earth has little to do with us. It has all to do with his plan and his providence and his purpose. And if God promises something and doesn't fulfill it, it makes him a liar. And if God is a liar, then everything we talk about is just a waste of time. But the God who purposed and planned that certain things would happen in the earth will make sure that those things come to pass. And all I ask us to do, I will set my eyes upon the ark as your leader, and I will follow it. These people up here on this stage, they've said to me, Pastor, as you follow the ark, we'll follow you. These people sitting down front have said to me, Pastor, these people over here said, Pastor, as we follow, as you follow, we'll follow. And I'm announcing today that I will follow the glory of God and his purpose and his plan. Maybe some surprises. Maybe some things that might catch us as strange. Maybe what God did yesterday, he won't do tomorrow. But we will follow him to the fulfillment of his promise because we have not passed this way before. Congratulations. You're about to embark on a brand new path.
New life in Jesus.